So, hi everyone, and welcome back to Path to Purpose. My name is Rebecca Jacobs, and I am the Communications and Marketing Coordinator at the Fair Finance Fund. On behalf of the fund, we begin today by acknowledging that we are on the traditional and ancestral territory of the land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. I and others from the fund work and live on the ancestral traditional territories of the Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit, whose territory is covered by the Upper Canada treaties. And as settlers, we're very grateful for the opportunity to work and to be here and to live on this land, and to all the generations of people who, for thousands of years, have taken care of the land that continues to nurture and feed us. I'm joined today by our host, Tony Neale, the founder and head farmer at Wheelbarrow Farm. So, a little bit about Tony. Tony began his farming journey back in 2008 on a 10-acre piece of land just located northeast of Toronto, Ontario. He's a first-generation self-taught farmer and started his farming adventure with an apprenticeship at Linnea Farm in British Columbia, if I'm pronouncing that right. After returning to Ontario, he launched Wheelbarrow Farm, focusing on sustainable farming practices and growing really top quality vegetables. Since then, the farm has grown from 1 to 7 acres, embracing permaculture principles and growing without the use of pesticides and herbicides. In 2018, Tony teamed up with Debbie Kinoshita and Garret Maxfield to take the farm to the next level. And together now they cultivate over 50 different types of crops and have made really amazing strides, like switching to solar power and investing in Canada's first Solectric electric tractor, which is pretty cool. And a fun fact, Tony's also a gifted musician and loves traveling in the winter to learn from farms all around the world. Today, we're really looking forward to hearing from Tony about his journey in managing and growing his farm's finances, including his experience and insights into innovative financing methods and learning how to adapt marketing and sales strategies during challenging times. So with that, we'll give a big welcome to Tony.
Hi, thank you for having me. Yeah, so I can just go over a little bit about who I am and the background of the farm. As was mentioned, I started farming. This is the 17th season here at Wheelbarrow Farm, and we're just located in Uxbridge. Um, I moved here with my dad. It was his property. He moved here to take a job close, and it's one of those kind of smallish rural properties. It was an old 100-acre farm divided into 10-acre properties. Most of them are not farmed because there's usually about maybe 4 to 5 acres free. So for a lot of big scale farmers, that's not worth cultivating. But for vegetables, it is, and it's actually a lot of work per acre. Um, in 2013, so about 5 years into farming, my dad let me know he was eventually 5 years from then going to sell the property. So I had to really switch gears and think about making more money and being able to save it. And even then, I needed partners to be able to make this happen. So in 2018, Debbie and Garret, who I've been friends with for a long time, joined the business, and we bought the farm from my dad, and we run it. The three of us. They live in Sarnia and handle a lot of the back end accounting, marketing, basically all the admin and taxes and that sort of things, which frees me up to focus on growing vegetables. And yeah, I guess this is our 6th or 7th year together, maybe 7. Um, and things are going well. We each have our own roles that we're good at, and it's been a really nice synergies created. Okay, so maybe you can put up the presentation slides now, if you don't mind. Here we are. Mechanization. It's something that when I started farming, and the farm is called Wheelbarrow Farm because I had this mindset early on, which I picked up from sort of the sustainable farming movement, I think at the time, was that small scale hand tools are good, tractors are bad. And I didn't think as much as I needed to early on about mechanization. And so now people who work for me and start their own farm, I'm trying to encourage them. Okay, think about where you're going to be in 5 years and the scale you're going to be at and what machinery you could think about investing in early on that you know you're going to need if you continue down this path. I'll also briefly touch on debt financing, the various ways we've financed projects or bought implements or done various things through the use of debt, including what we call community bonds. Is really a private loan, but we've received 2 rounds of funding now through our customers to help invest in the farm. And then briefly at the end, I hope to talk about a few government programs that we found useful and the importance of them. Okay, maybe next slide, if you can. It's a few pictures. We can just rifle through them just to give you a sense of what the farm looks like. This is actually a neighbor's field that we grow on. I think we have about an acre and a half there. We do mix veg, but we also do flowers. The next slide is a tractor made by Tillmore that we purchased with the help of borrowing money from our customers last spring. And it's really made a huge impact at reducing the hours of weeding. This is yesterday, is a big CSA day for us. So we sell into Toronto almost exclusively, and about 60% runs through the CSA and 40% through 2 farmers markets that we do. But almost all of our sales are in Toronto, and we're about 100 kilometers away. Next slide. Next slide is one of our staff, Teresa, who's been here for maybe 4 years. So we hire Canadians, which is a little different than most agriculture in Canada, especially vegetables. And it's our goal to hopefully turn some employees into employee owners. And so we've set up the company as a corporation. And we have things in place which we could legally quite easily add someone as a new owner. And that's our goal, partly as a necessity. I don't know how young people are going to buy farms in the GTA. And I don't know how you pay off a farm mortgage these days with a farm business, which is a strange place to be in. So it's kind of our way of joining forces, and not each person doesn't need to own a farm. We can have a group of people, hopefully, that run this place together. Okay, next slide. So I just want to emphasize that competition is a super important force driving our economy, and it puts incredible constraints on what you can do as a business. Not that you don't have some flexibility, but even, for example, just price setting. You can't set the price that you want to set because otherwise we just set it way high, and that would be great. Wherever you're selling, you're in competition with other vendors, say it's at a farmer's market, but also generally we're in competition with all food process producers now globally, because 80% of our fruit and veg comes not from Canada. And so just realizing what constraints that puts on, for example, in price setting, in wages, there is an upper limit that you can pay in wages when you're competing with people who hire at minimum wage, which is most like all migrant work is set at minimum wage. And then if you start looking at international prices for labor of food that makes it to our grocery stores, it can be $1 an hour or less sometimes, coming from certain countries, the equivalency in Canadian dollars. So these things all put tremendous pressure on your business, and just being aware of that pressure, it's kind of stressful running, being in the entrepreneurial space, because you can go under. And I've seen probably half of the farm businesses that I started with now don't exist. So it's real, and it's not even a personal thing. It's if your productive capacity or efficiencies are below what everyone else's are over time, all else being equal, you're going to go out of business. So it's something I didn't think about as much when I started, and it's something I think about quite a bit now, because you have to be on your toes all the time. Okay, maybe next slide, please. Just some words I'm going to be throwing out there. Probably everybody knows them, but I'll just go over them quickly. Gross income, it's all of your sales, all of your earnings, sales, rent, etc. It's an important metric, but not the most important, which is net income. It's what you get to keep at the end of the day, at the end of the year, rather. And so knowing what those are and factoring those in not just on a yearly basis, but I don't know if the people on this call are producing many different things, but we try and look at each crop that we grow and see, we grow mostly in 100-foot beds. What is the gross sales per bed? How long did it take? What do we basically estimate the net from it was? And use that to guide your growing decisions, and not being really beholden to, I mean, if vegetable A has a less of a margin than B, you should really be focusing on transactions with positive margins. So it's the next slide, I think, is just going over what the margin would be. It's the portion of a company's sales that it gets to keep at the end of the year. And so that's something year to year, but also crop to crop, that we have to pay attention to. Okay, next, please. So yeah, focusing on mechanization first, just touching on it. Every year we like to look at what were the biggest pain points for labor, because labor is almost all, especially in agriculture, labor is your by far highest cost. So what things took the longest, what were physically challenging jobs that can tend to bring morale down. It's not, you can't just throw people out there to do endless weeding. So for us, 2 years ago, a big one was mechanizing the weeding process. It's by far the biggest job. Planting goes relatively quickly. Harvesting, same. But the weeding process for some crops, they have to do over and over. If you're using hand tools, it just became endless, and we were losing crops. So, but beyond that, I wish I had bought a tractor in my first year, and we can talk about how to do that through debt financing. Um, and I do encourage people who have worked here and then leave to start their own farm is to figure out how quickly you can get a tractor. Again, in my first years, my decision not to was, I think, partly because I didn't really understand debt financing, but also I had this ideological idea in my mind that tractors were bad for the soil, which, and this picture is a picture of cover crops being incorporated with the tractor. Okay, tractors can be bad for the soil, but they've also allowed me to be good for the soil much easier. So spreading, growing, incorporating cover crops by hand or with a two-wheel tractor that's a lot of hours, but I can do it really quickly and easily now, all mechanized. So I actually think that mechanizing with tractors has actually been a net positive for the soil. So um, but that's just to say, I don't know if people are starting up their businesses and they're in their first couple years of it, but if you're doing vegetables, I would really recommend thinking about debt financing tractors. Okay, next, please. Yeah, this is something I didn't think about at the beginning, but you should, I mean, my advice is to actually seek out some debt. If the terms are right and if the percentage is low enough for you to buy something and have it add to your company, you should be trying to seek out a little bit of debt. It can be risky, so I'm not suggesting you just run out and max everything and spend it all. Because if I would have done that in my early years, I would have made a lot of bad purchases, I think. But nevertheless, it's one way to grow your business, and to make things happen faster than they would have if you're just saving. Okay, so for us, we've used debt 3 times. One was before we transitioned the company, and it was just me running it. And I had been using a two-wheel tractor, and in 2013, it needed some servicing, and I thought, this is crazy. By then, I was doing maybe 4 or 5 acres. It was just too much to do with a walk-behind tractor. And it happened really quickly, and it surprised me how easy it was to go into a dealership and put, I think probably it was $5,000 down. They check your credit, and then you're signed up for monthly payments for 5 years, which at the time I think was around $400 a month. Um, but that was the year I realized, or my dad told me that he was going to sell the farm. So I knew I needed something to really take a leap forward in production and efficiency. And now it's paid off. One thing to think about when you're uh, buying assets, tools, is that they retain a lot of their value. I just looked up my very tractor used with the equivalent amount of hours, and I could sell it for more than I bought it for. Now, partly because of inflation. Well, yeah, because of inflation. So the value is less, but nevertheless, it's something you should keep in the back of your mind that the things you buy, tools, mechanization, they remain on your asset list. And if you keep them in good condition, uh, you can sell them later on. So our first one was the Kubota tractor, and that was a straight up um, financing through Kubota. And it just linked up my bank account, and for 5 years, I paid $400 a month. In 2018, we purchased a prototype of an electric tractor from California, and at the same time, we installed 20 kilowatts of solar array. And for this, we needed to, I'm not sure if we needed to, but we decided to anyway, seek private debt financing. And so we did this through our customer base primarily and some friends and family. Maybe you can switch the next slide now, Rebecca, if you don't mind. Okay, here's some of the solar array. It's a double array with 40 panels. Um, and if just in case, if you're thinking about solar, if all goes well, it's a 8-year return to break even. At least the last time I looked at it. And with prices of electricity going up and prices of solar panels going down, it should be shorter in the future. So it's one investment that if you plan to be buying electricity 9 years from now, and you have money, or you can do some debt financing, then that's an option on farms. We use a lot of electricity. We use it for irrigation. We use it to heat our seedling greenhouse in a way in the spring. And then a huge fridge, all our wash water, everyone who lives here, laundry, everything. So for about 6 months of the year, we don't spend anything on electricity because we're producing it all. And we're still a few years out from being fully paid off, but that's just where we're at. Next slide, please. This is the electric tractor that we use on the farm. And we raised, I think, I can't recall, maybe $30,000 from our customers to help us pay for both of these things. Can do the next slide, please. Oh yes, this is Teresa and Ana, and two of the tractors. The tractor closer, the red one, is one that last year we did a second round of customer funded debt financing for this tractor. And probably of all the tools, it's made the biggest impact in terms of making the workday better. So way less weeding. And without weeds, then you have less pest or fungal pressure. Your vegetables get all of the water when you're irrigating. They get all of the sunlight. So we've noticed a huge benefit to our growing with that tractor. Okay, next slide, please. And you can go to the next slide also. So we called them community bonds. A bond is something specific, which I think maybe just nonprofits. It's regulated. What is a bond? This is we called it community bonds. It's basically a private loan. And we did them for this round. The first round for solar, I think we did at 4%. This round we did at 5%. And so this was part of our email that went out to customers. I just took a picture of it, letting customers know what their returns would be. So you can see that over 5 years, 5% compounded annually ends up at around 28%. So whatever we borrowed, we have to pay that back plus 28% in the future. It requires us doing annual T5s if you want to do it above board. You can just accept money if you want and pay back in cash or however you want to do it. But to be above board, you have to issue T5s for the debtees, the people lending us money. You can go to the next slide. So for that reason, the larger the investment, the better in terms of what you're obliged to do every year. This was part of the loan agreement. I think we scrounged it from the internet and made it a little bit more ours, but I can share this as a PDF if people are interested. So, and it goes on from here. There's maybe 15 clauses. And okay, why? People giving you money want to see something official, especially if you're doing something, a private loan. It's riskier, not for the person receiving the money, it's riskier for people giving out money. So the more legalese you can use in your contract, I think, the better. Because a bank has an easy way to get your money back if you take out a loan and you default on it. A private creditor, there are ways you have to take someone to court, and that's possible too, but it's less easy. So the risk is more on the creditor. So making it as legal as possible for them was a consideration for us. Okay, you can skip to the next one. Okay, I just threw the slide in there because this is what we're doing now. So I don't know what we borrowed, maybe 40,000. And so we have to pay back something like 50 some thousand in 3.5 years from now. So over those 5 years, we have to be putting away money to pay back that loan, because we don't want the loan to come due and think, oh shit, where's $50,000? So in the meantime, every year we're putting away a bit. In the meantime, that goes into a cashable GIC, which is an option if your business ever has some spare money that's just sitting in your checking account. We just started doing them last year. They're pretty easy once you set it up. You can manage them yourself just by clicking money back and forth on your same website. Right now, it's paying 5% a year. So some of the money that we're going to pay back, we have in savings, and it's collecting the same amount of interest that we borrowed it at. So it's one way to help us, as we're saving up and getting ready to pay back, to negate some of that interest cost. But beside that, it's something you can do. Like we're a CSA farm, and there's a bit of time in the spring where we collect money, but we haven't spent it exactly. And so it's an option. When you have more than 30 days of cash sitting around, you can click it over and collect 5% per annum interest on it. So I guess that's all from that side. That was just kind of a side note of if you do decide to borrow money privately, as you're saving it to pay it back eventually, you can be collecting interest. Okay, other debt options. I mean, maybe Rebecca, you could say you've probably covered fair finance funds because this is, and I think you mentioned most people on this call are clients of fair finance funds. Um, Obviously, there's your banks as well, and there's also Farm Credit Canada, which is worth looking into. We haven't dealt with Farm Credit Canada, uh, but some of my friends have, and they said it's a smooth process and they're helpful, especially for young farmers. And whatever your options are, this might sound obvious, but seek the one with the lowest interest rate. We may, in time, I think Fair Finance Fund is 8%. Is that correct? We would go to 8% if we couldn't get 7%, and we would go to 7 if we couldn't get 6, all the way down. We've even left a space on our community bonds where people can check off bears interest at 5% or doesn't bear interest, which I think we had maybe a few customers. You never know. Maybe they're wanting to help out of the goodness of their heart and not collect interest on it, and that can happen. So seek the lowest interest rate that you can, which is probably just obvious, but we would keep seeking it as low as possible up until we hit whatever. I think Farm Credit Canada is somewhere between 7 and 9% too. That's it for that slide. Okay, reinvesting. It's something that I've tried to do every year, and I mentioned before by looking at your labor pain points and trying to eliminate them with mechanization. Because, and getting back to the idea of competition, whether it's at your market or just in the general food economy, everybody else is doing that. People are working so hard, and if there's 10 people at a market or wherever you're selling, and nine of the businesses are reinvesting every year in labor saving technologies, for example, and one of the vendors is, I don't know what, spending it on fun stuff, all else being equal, over time, that one goes out of business. So I guess just reiterating, you have to be on your toes and willing to work hard in the entrepreneurial space because somebody else is, uh, and it's going to determine your rate of productivity. It's going to also determine how long you get to be a business. And these reinvestments add up in important ways over time. So I'm a big proponent of sacrificing the present a little bit for future gains that you can realize later on. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, just to touch on a few government programs which aren't necessarily related to debt financing, but they count nevertheless. One of them is Agri-Invest, which is run through Agricorp. And you have to apply when you do your taxes. But once you get set up, your bank will set you up with a side bank account. And this program allows you to put in up to 1%. Actually, it might be up to 2%, 1 to 2% of your gross sales for the year. So $100,000, you're able to put in $1,000 to $2,000. The government at the end of the year matches it 100%. So it's like 1% of your gross the government's giving you every year, which is actually huge if you consider the difference between gross and net, because that 1% of your gross is actually probably 10 or more percent of your net profit for the year, which you can get automatically every year once you sign up for just this one program. Some other ones that we have participated in or do currently, one is SRED, it's like a tax credit. YESP in Canada, summer jobs or wage subsidies. And then there's some private funding like Carrot Cash. During COVID, there were various programs as well, like the CEBA loans. I think it was close to 1 million businesses in Canada accessed the CEBA loan, which was $60,000 zero interest loan for 3 or 4 years with $20,000 forgivable. So if you think of how hard you have to work to actually put $20,000 in your bank account, for us, it takes a whole year and 7 staff and a whole bunch of markets, 300 CSA customers just to put maybe 20 grand away. And if you're on it, sometimes there are programs where, I mean, the CEBA was a $20,000 gift, but some of them are $1,000 here, $1,000 there. It adds up, and it's so much easier than growing carrots if you have the right team. So I'm lucky with my business partners that they handle all of this, and I can focus on the vegetables. But it's worth looking into, and this is not an extensive list. And it would be nice. My dream for a farm helping NGO is to like help farmers navigate through this, because it can be some of the most impactful programs that for some people will be sink or swim, and it's not always easy if you're a farmer to be thinking of government programs or to navigate your way through them. I tried with Agri-Invest and got frustrated, and I offloaded it to Garret, and I think he's now offloaded it to another accountant to get us signed up for it. But I probably wouldn't be applying for any of these things on my own. And so life would be a lot harder. So I think there's room in the nonprofit world for people to really understand these programs and help us through them. Yeah. I guess, is that the last slide maybe? Okay, this
One
is the
more, yeah.
last slide. Um, so we do this on a crop to crop basis. And I think I read this also in the book, The Lean Farm, is to not be tied to things. You know, everything we grow, whether it's radishes or tomatoes, I believe in it. It's not something, it shouldn't matter to me, but it used to, like what my crop distribution was. You need a certain amount of distribution of crop to crop to have a nice market stand and to supply your CSA, but there is some wiggle room. And I don't know when it was, but several years back, I started looking at like, okay, I don't really like, for example, fennel or radicchio, but they sure make twice as many gross sales per 100-foot bed as do beans or something like that. So not being tied to, this is going to sound bad, just being tied to that positive net transaction at the highest percentage possible, um, and allow yourself to be guided by that. I say it's sounding bad because it makes it sound like I'm greedy or I want money, but that's not it. There's so many pressures. We're giving raises every year. We have debts to pay off, and so we're just seeking easy transactions. Still, easy transactions are not easy, but not being beholden to things that in your mind should be selling but aren't, or aren't as good of a return as others. So every year I tweak the growing plan with that in mind, among other things. And then abandoning any transaction or anything you're growing that has a negative margin or a zero margin, like doing nothing has a zero margin. So that's easier than doing something, having all these gross sales and ending up with nothing. You might as well not do it. And so for me, that was animals. I don't have the land base to grow grain. And then I don't know when it was, 2010s, sometime grain price really went up and abattoir costs really went up. And I was doing a lot of work and ending up with nothing in the bank at the end of the day. And so that was really the last time I raised animals. There are ways to raise animals profitably, but it wasn't happening on this farm, and maybe with me as the manager, I'm not sure, their land base. But so really looking into things like if they're not positive net, then you should probably think about changing them or just giving up on them. And with that, I conclude my presentation, but uh, there's plenty of time for questions. So
Well, thank you so much, Tony. Really great to hear everything in your own experience and just all these various stages that you and Wheelbarrow have gone through. So yeah, we have about 20-25 minutes for questions. So folks, feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat here, or you can just unmute and ask yourself. I do see that Lynn has said that she's or they are interested in getting the PDF of that loan agreement that you used, Tony. So we can definitely make sure to share that out with everyone at the end of this presentation.
I have a question. Thanks so much for that, Tony. That was excellent. I'm curious if it changed the relationship at all to take those bonds, like with your customers. Did it strengthen it or change it in any way?
I don't know. I think it probably strengthened it. That first round has been paid off, and many of the people who were paid off for the first round reinvested it when we did our second round. So I think that would indicate that. And actually, I would say this: the second round that we did, it was full within a day, and we had to turn people down.
You had to,
And we had
interesting.
and we had the ability to say thank you for the $1,000 offer, but we have another one for five. And with all the T5s you have to write, we're going to stick with the biggest ones. But we'll see, because I didn't. It was on the slide somewhere, but I didn't talk about it. We have a two, third or fourth round that we want to do for a big build for a commercial kitchen, shower, bathrooms, um, tearing down the back part of the barn and rebuilding it. So
Wow.
I guess we'll see. But I feel pretty confident that some of the same people would re-up and that we could find people pretty quickly. And for us, that's like I was mentioning, just find the lowest percentage and then go from there. Whatever we can't get from our customers, we would go up to try our bank first, try the Fair Finance Fund and Farm Credit Canada.
I'd always assumed that like the further away relationship, like it would actually be easier. Like if you didn't have to see the person you took a kind of a loan from on a daily or weekly basis, like to make anyone uncomfortable or like you
I
said,
think
it
the
actually
opposite.
the opposite. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Thanks.
see a question here about are you including salary to yourself, which is a good question, especially with we do because we're a corporation. I have to pay myself at least minimum, but we pay ourselves the same as we pay our management staff. And that gives you your true profit margin. If you're running a sole proprietorship and you spend, no, sorry, you generate 100 grand and you spend 80 of it on staff and equipment and you think $20,000 is left, that's profit. It's probably not because you haven't paid yourself. So you have to pay yourself at least minimum plus WSIB, CPPEI contributions. Then figure out how many hours you did. And like, it's not rare. For my first 5 or more years, I was running a deficit. Um, but we're not anymore. But that's this question is like, yeah, it's not a true profit if you don't pay yourself at the very least minimum plus contributions.
Got another question that came in here. Do you have to comply with any security regulations to issue community bonds?
Right. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, we know we have to do T5s. And like I said, technically they're not bonds. I'm not sure. I don't know who would be out looking for that or how it would come out. There would be like a lot of trouble if you default on them. But to be honest, I don't know, except for the T5s. Yeah, and you have to do proper accounting with it on top of the T5s as income, as an expense when it goes out.
And I know, of course, here at Fair Finance Fund, we have a bit of experience offering bonds. So if folks are interested in that, you can certainly reach out. Our loan officer and others on the team here will be very happy to chat through just some of what that background can look like. We, of course, are a nonprofit, so it might be slightly different from for-profit businesses, but we can definitely share what we know and our experience. And Tony, I have a question for you. Admittedly, a little biased as someone in marketing and communications, but it doesn't sound like you had any issue marketing these, we'll keep calling them community bonds. But how did you first go about approaching your client base?
We did it only through email of our email. I don't think we did it on social media. We just did it through email. And yeah, but we've also by this point had been in business for over a decade and had some sort of cachet. I think it'd be, if you're in your first couple of years, you're more looking towards family and friends if you want to go that private route until you get some customers. Unless you get lucky, who knows? We decided not to do social media unless we needed it. And then we did notice one thing. So I don't know how many people are on our mail out, probably a couple thousand. We did notice after that, we do quarterly newsletters. That's pretty much it for the mail out. We did notice after, and then we did a special one for community bonds, and we had, I don't know, 10 unsubscribes after that, which is, I guess maybe it didn't sit well with some people. So there is that to think about.
I can say that's not a bad rate. That's pretty low. So well done.
I have more if no one else does. But maybe it's for Rebecca as well. Like, what does happen if you default? Like, is there a plan B? How do you make sure that doesn't happen? If it's too negative, we don't have to talk about it.
Me?
That was for both of you.
Okay.
You can see you're not jumping on it though.
I mean, from our point of view, we felt confident that no matter what, we've been doing this business for enough years that we can count on being able to pay it back.
Mhm.
Something goes wrong, we can sell the tractor. If you're
Mm.
doing that for solar panels or a kitchen build, that's a little different. You could, in this not sustainable long term, but you could take out a new loan 5 years down the road from a bank and pay off the old one, but like you can't keep doing that forever. And then what happens is your creditors could sue you, and they could also sue you for legal fees and other things. So it could be a bad path if you overexpose yourself.
Mhm.
You open yourself up. But
See, I knew it was
so
negative, but it's never happened, right? No.
And I can talk quite generally. I'm not the expert when it comes to the legal matters of these, of community bonds or of loans. But what I can say is that transparency and full information up front is probably the most important thing that you can do. So
Mhm.
having that document, that loan agreement, that investment agreement right from the beginning so that folks can see what they are investing in and to also understand that there is risk involved. Like any investment, if you were buying stocks on the stock market, it is a risk. There is some potential that you might
yeah.
win big, you might win a little, and you might lose that investment altogether. And that just is a risk. That is the reality of investments overall. And so making that very clear from the beginning, you of course can decide what the risk factors would be and how much information you wish to disclose, but being as transparent as possible right from the very beginning. And that does reduce that risk as well.
Mhm. I see Lynn had put in like creditors could possibly put a lien on the property, but I imagine like if you only had $1,000 invested, they just wouldn't, like it's low investment, low risk, like low care about getting anything back on time. Like maybe it's easier to have several smaller investments than, or bonds as we call them. Interesting.
And again, I apologize, it's not me, but we do have plenty of folks here on the Fair Finance team and many folks who are experts in these matters. So if anyone on the call or watching this recording later is really considering offering community bonds or some sort of crowdfunding option, you can feel free to reach out to us and we can certainly help advise you along that path. I'm personally also very interested in the electric tractor that you invested in, Tony, and how, I guess for one, how that differs, and what led you down that path to choosing to invest into an electric tractor specifically over a gas tractor, diesel tractor.
Yeah, it was one of those right time, right place, right idea in my mind, I guess. I like electricity. I think it's really great. Uh, we use it as many ways as we can on the farm, and we can produce it, which is cool. Also, especially if you have high energy needs, which a lot of farms do. Taking that partly for independence and partly financially, but being able to produce, we're used to producing vegetables, but now we're producing, I don't know, the flow of electrons through wires. Um, and, and so the tractor itself is an electric tractor, so it doesn't have solar panels on it, but when we charge it, we're getting juice from the panels. And it's just an electric motor. It's a little early, like it's an okay tractor. We don't use it in the field. Like I have a workhorse diesel Kubota that I use for a lot of the dirty work. Then we have our Tillmore for basically just weeding. And then the electric tractor pretty much lives with a wagon on the back of it. And it's used for taking things places, which is most of farming, it seems like. Take the seedlings out, you bring tools out, you bring the vegetables back. And it's a easy tool that I feel safe training all staff to use because you just turn it on. The future of electric tractors is kind of exciting, but it's going to require cheaper battery prices and more electric tractors being made. I think mine was the first purpose-made commercial electric tractor. You could do whatever you want and make an electric tractor at your house, but this was one of the first purpose-made ones. So at the time, it was the best and also the worst, and now it's probably forever the worst electric tractor that exists. But it has some limitations based on cost and based on battery cost. But batteries will come down for sure, and we're eventually we'll end the lithium era of batteries and go into something more sustainable and way cheaper. Because that's one of the issues. Is the amount of work that you can do on it right now with the battery pack it has. We're pretty maxed out with price in the batteries that could be put in, and space and weight. Also, they're super heavy. Um, and so that energy density of batteries that were made maybe 7 years ago now is it's not good for doing a full day of tractor work. So it has limitations. I think it's cool. I like using it, and I like trying to see what on our farm we can swap fossil fuels out for electricity. So it's pretty common in seedlings to heat your greenhouse with propane or natural gas or some sort of oil, which we had been doing for a long time. But in our new seedling greenhouse, we built tables and then a small hoop structure over our main table, which can house quite a few flats, which at night we put plastic on it. Underneath, we have a series of electric radiators. Um, and so this year we didn't use any propane. Usually I mean, it's been a slow transition, but back in the day I was spending $2,000 a year on propane um, to heat the seedling greenhouse, which was at the time smaller, less seedlings. And now it's the electricity that we produce. Our pump too, we switched the irrigation. So I'm trying to get as many things as possible that you used to do with gas onto electric and battery powered, including chainsaws. I have a nice electric chainsaw, whippersnipper. They're making some really cool tools with sufficient runtime now. Um, so, but as for tractors, it's going to take more being built that way to bring the price down and make them better.
I know something else that I think is very unique to your experience is that you have traveled quite a bit as well, visiting farms in Central South America, I know, elsewhere perhaps as well. And I'm wondering if you have any insights. Well, I'm sure you have very many insights from those experiences, but maybe in particular around just uh, the financial management side of running farms and anything that you've learned through your travels around perhaps how things can be done differently or with a different perspective, and anything that you'd be.
It's mostly
Yeah.
been working on farms in Brazil, which I've really appreciated the opportunity to do that. And it's been a good perspective as a boss to be on the other side, to be taking orders, and also to be able to watch things from the other side and see what happens with morale and what happens with workflow, especially around mechanization, because it's not very mechanized there, at least the farms that I was working on. It gave me some thought about migrant work, um, because on these farms I was mostly working with rural workers, and literally every single one was like, "Please, can you offer me a job?" Um, because they find out what labor prices are here versus there, quite low. It's quite suppressed in rural Brazil. Um, I hadn't, I've thought a lot about migrant work, why we rely on it so much, and it at least gave me challenging my perspective on it that there are so many people who, for them, it would be actually a huge opportunity. Um, just interesting because I think a lot of people don't talk to rural farm workers or migrant workers here or in other countries too. Um, so hearing their perspectives on things was eye-opening. What else? I mean, food prices are really low there. Um, I think I'm glad that we grow and produce in Canada. The farmers market networks are huge. You can basically, if you're producing vegetables, flowers, meat, in most cities now, you can walk into as soon as assuming you get a space, you can walk into a really nice market with thousands of customers every week. And that culture was there a little bit, but felt like it was much further back in the past. And so, at least in the GTA, we have some amazing resources for farmers, avenues for us to sell our wares with pretty minimal upfront costs. Like even a double booth at a premium market might be $100 a day. If you think about that as a store overhead, that's nothing. So I feel really grateful for all the work, probably since the 80s. I don't know when organic farmers markets started appearing in the scene, but when I started farming in 2008, there was a handful in Toronto, and then 5 years later, there's 30 now. So definitely made me appreciative of that.
Yeah, it certainly is a very different market setup. I mean, markets are very common, of course, through many of these regions, Central South America, but very, very different environment and customer base to the farmers market seen in North America. So yes, it's amazing that these networks have set up and are very, very grounded now in various communities, and as you say, in almost every town you go to. Well, I had a few folks message to say they were very, very thankful for this talk that you've given, Tony, and apologies that they had to dip out a little bit early, but they were very thankful for everything that you've shared so far. And maybe just in the very last few minutes, you can touch on another topic that you did talk a little bit about, and that's just the CSA program. So Wheelbarrow, of course, that is one of your, I believe, the main way that you sell your produce is through the CSA. And maybe you can just talk a little bit really quickly about how you first set that up and yeah, how you started setting that up and finding those clients who are willing to pay upfront.
Well, for I don't know now, 13 or 14 years, it was a very small CSA. I mostly did farmers markets. Pre-pandemic, I was doing 6 markets a week and maybe 40 or 50 CSA. And then in, I don't know, the month that COVID hit, we went from 40 to 400 CSA customers and 6 markets to 0 markets. So it's relatively new for us to be doing it so much. And of course, every year since COVID-1, our numbers have come down a little bit, but we've kind of stabilized at 325 CSA customers. And it's the best way, in my mind, to sell with the least risk and the highest margins, the least overhead. There's overhead in different ways, like in marketing and administration. But for us, we would do, if we could, we would do all CSAs. So it's a matter of finding the customers. We do social media. We get a lot of customers. We offer referrals. So the second year they sign up again. I don't know what we give them, some store credit because we have an e-store. So we get a lot from referrals, and then we get a good amount from Google searches. And then lastly, we do targeted mailings in neighborhoods that we already service, but we want to reach more customers. So there's should be at least zero waste. Like we'll go to a market, come home, we almost never come home with nothing. And if it's been sitting out all day, don't usually feel good, depending on what it is. If it's a potato, that's one thing, but if it's a green, then basically it's compost or farmer food. But there's only so much we can eat. So to go to Toronto, I shared that picture. It was from yesterday of we did 111 CSA shares in the city yesterday, and the van was like totally packed. And we came home with nothing. So we always have a little bit extra in case of quality control spoilage. So I guess we came home with a little bit, but essentially nothing. And so um, it's one of the reasons we really like the CSA program is reducing waste.
Well, we're about out of time now. If anyone does have any questions that pop up later, you're thinking about anything that was talked about today and you're like, oh, I wish I had asked that, do feel free to message us later and we're happy to help support. But I'll just say a big thank you to everyone here for joining today's session and for joining the Path to Purpose series this year. And a huge thank you to Tony for taking the time out of your very busy day, your very busy schedule to join us and share your experiences, your insights, your knowledge. It's so valuable. And on behalf of Fair Finance Fund, a huge thank you, and thank you from everyone here for taking the time today.
Yes, thanks for having me, and I'll I'll forward that loan agreement to you, and then you can send it out if you like.
That's perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, that concludes Path to Purpose this year round, and we'll see you again soon.